Over 27 million drivers called AAA for emergency roadside help last year alone, and what the tow truck drivers won't tell you is that a disturbing number of those engines didn't have to die, because the difference between an engine that quits at 90,000 miles and one that pushes past 400,000 comes down to a single oil change habit, and 90% of drivers have never heard of it. I spent 6 months digging through used oil analysis reports from Blackstone Laboratories, the gold standard for engine oil testing in North America, and I cross-referenced those reports against the maintenance logs of high-mileage vehicles. We're talking verified cases. A 2007 Toyota Tundra that hit 1 million miles with its original drivetrain. A Toyota Tacoma that crossed 1.6 million miles before the owner replaced the transmission. A Land Cruiser sitting at over 1.6 million miles right now, still running its original engine. Every single one of those owners followed the same oil change discipline. But here is what makes this criminal. The oil change advice being handed to you at your local quick-lube shop is not designed to help your engine live to 400,000 miles. It is designed to get you back through the door on a predictable schedule, the interval they quote you, the filter brand they throw on, the oil they pour in. None of it is calibrated to the one habit that actually separates engines that fail at 80,000 miles from engines that are still running clean at 250,000. There are 5 oil change mistakes destroying engines on the road right now, and 4 practices shared by every driver who has broken 400,000 miles. Stay with me, because the #1 habit will completely change how you think about oil changes forever. Marcus Webb. At just 60,000 miles, a 2019 Ford F-150 EcoBoost belonging to Marcus Webb of Columbus, Ohio, needed a $6,800 engine rebuild. The dealership told him it was just bad luck. Marcus had changed his oil on time, every time. He used the right synthetic. But here is what makes this criminal. Every one of those oil changes was almost completely useless. Austin, Texas oil analysis specialist Dr. Rebecca Cho at Blackstone Laboratories has processed over 180,000 used oil samples in the past decade. Short trips are the single most destructive pattern we see in oil reports. When an engine never reaches full operating temperature, around 195 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit, fuel vapor and condensation moisture don't burn off. They mix into the oil. By 3,000 miles on a short trip pattern, we regularly see fuel dilution levels that would be catastrophic on a 10,000 mile sample. The oil looks fresh on the outside, but is chemically compromised. But here's what makes this worse. A driver doing short trips can follow every manufacturer recommendation perfectly and still be running on essentially contaminated oil by mile 2,500. Marcus Webb had been doing the same 3-mile school run twice daily for 4 years. Every oil change interval looked fine on paper, but inside that EcoBoost, unburned fuel was diluting the crankcase, thinning the oil's viscosity, and stripping the protective film from his cam lobes and main bearings. At 58,000 miles, his dealer ran an oil sample. TBN had dropped to 1.9. Below 3.0, combustion acids attack bearings directly. Dealer told him to keep an eye on it. At 61,000 miles, the engine rattled on startup and never recovered. Rebuild estimate $6,800. His prior 14 oil changes at $85 each, $1,190. His actual cost per mile of engine protection, $0.113, before labor and rental. This is what short trip syndrome actually costs your wallet. But the next habit destroys engines even faster, and it is happening right now in millions of trucks sitting at red lights. Sandra Mitchell. Every morning, over 65 million Americans start their car and let it idle for 5, 10, sometimes 15 minutes before pulling out of the driveway. They believe they are protecting their engine. The data says they are doing the opposite. Portland, Oregon engine wear researcher and tribologist James Harrington has published findings on cold start wear patterns across 12 gasoline engine families. Extended idling is specifically damaging to turbocharged engines because the turbocharger requires oil pressure to lubricate its shaft bearings. At idle, oil pressure is at its lowest, sometimes 10 to 15 pounds per square inch in a warm engine, less when cold. The turbo shaft spins at up to 200,000 revolutions per minute. During a 5-minute idle, you are running that bearing in a low lubrication condition for hundreds of thousands of revolutions. But here's what the manufacturer won't tell you. The fix is not to idle longer. The fix is to drive gently for the first 3 to 5 minutes instead. Sandra Mitchell from Denver, Colorado bought a 2021 Ram 1500 with the 3.6-liter Pentastar for $51,000. Every morning in winter, Sandra let it idle for 10 minutes to warm up the cab. At 44,000 miles, a faint ticking started at cold startup. Dealer said valve train noise monitor it. At 47,000 miles, ticking worsened and oil pressure warning flickered at startup. Dealer said normal for the first few seconds. At 49,000 miles, the engine threw a bearing at highway speed on Interstate 25. Full engine replacement, $9,200. Ram extended her no goodwill assistance because the failure was classified as maintenance related. "I was doing what my father told me to do," Sandra said. "Warm it up before you drive. Nobody told me that advice was from 1987. At $51,000 purchase price and catastrophic failure at 49,000 miles, that Ram cost Sandra $1.04 per mile in purchase value alone before the $9,200 repair. The next habit kills engines more quietly, and the quick lube industry has spent 40 years making sure you never find out about it. David Reyes. GM issued a formal service bulletin, reference 07-06-01-016G, updated as recently as February 2022, warning that incorrect or cheap oil filters with lower than required bypass pressure settings send unfiltered oil directly to your engine bearings. Not sometimes, every single oil change, if the filter is wrong. Denver master technician Carlos Espinoza has been rebuilding engines for 22 years and consults for 3 dealerships across Colorado. Modern turbocharged engines run extremely high oil flow rates. The filter needs a bypass valve set to match that pressure. When you grab a generic filter off a shelf at a discount store, the one selling for $3.99 or $4.99, the bypass valve often opens at pressures too low for your engine. Oil gets pushed around the filter media, never touching the filtration material at all. I have pulled engines where the filter looked brand new after 5,000 miles, because oil was bypassing it the entire time. Meanwhile, metal particles, soot, and combustion debris circulated freely through the main bearings. But here is what makes this criminal. Your oil looks perfectly clean on the dipstick. There is no warning light, no noise, nothing to indicate that for the past 5,000 miles, your $4 filter has been sending unfiltered oil through the heart of your engine. David Reyes from Phoenix, Arizona drove a 2020 Chevy Silverado 5.3 liter, bought it new for $48,500. He changed his oil religiously every 5,000 miles, always at the same discount shop that charged $39.99 for a full synthetic change. At 72,000 miles, oil consumption jumped to 1 quart every 800 miles. Dealer inspected, found catastrophic scoring on cylinder walls 3 and 5. The oil filter used in his last 3 changes was a generic brand, with a documented bypass pressure 40% below GM specification for that engine. Repair estimate $7,400. The shop offered him a coupon for a free oil change. At $48,500 purchase price and significant engine damage at 72,000 miles, those $39.99 oil changes cost David $7,400 in preventable damage, before the $400 in labor to even diagnose it. That is 10 cents in additional damage cost per mile, every single mile since mile 15,000. The next mistake is the one that quietly ends the life of the engines you see on the highway every single day. Thomas Bradley. Every driver who has crossed 400,000 miles on a single engine has one thing in common beyond regular oil changes. Every single one of them has at some point sent an oil sample to a laboratory. Not once, consistently, and it costs $25 to $35 per sample. Nashville, Tennessee chemical engineer and oil analysis consultant Patricia Nguyen has worked with fleet operators and private vehicle owners for 15 years. Used oil analysis, or UOA, is the single most underused diagnostic tool available to any vehicle owner. A $28 sample from Blackstone Laboratories tells you exactly how much iron, copper, aluminum, and chromium is in your oil. Those are your wear metals. It tells you your TBN, which measures how much protective additive is left. It tells you if you have coolant contamination, fuel dilution, or silicon ingestion from a failing air filter seal. We routinely catch failing head gaskets, worn piston rings, and bearing deterioration thousands of miles before any symptom appears. But here is what makes this outrageous. Oil analysis has been standard practice in commercial trucking and aviation for 50 years. Your diesel semi never blows an engine on schedule. It blows an engine when the data says it will. Your personal vehicle gets none of that protection. Thomas Bradley of Raleigh, North Carolina owned a 2018 Honda Accord 1.5T that he purchased for $28,000. He changed his oil every 7,500 miles using a quality full synthetic. At 95,000 miles, his engine consumed progressively more oil between changes, but showed no other symptoms. A dealer visit at 97,000 miles yielded a normal consumption for this engine response. Thomas ran his first oil analysis at 101,000 miles. The report flagged elevated iron at 47 parts per million and aluminum at 22 parts per million, with a note to investigate piston ring or cylinder wall wear. He had the engine scoped immediately. The rings were worn but catchable with targeted treatment. Total cost? $380. His neighbor Greg bought the same Accord, same year, never ran an oil analysis. At 108,000 miles, his engine failed catastrophically. Full replacement at $6,100. Same root cause. Different outcomes separated entirely by a $28 test. The final mistake is the most widespread one on this list, and the oil companies love it. Kevin Marsh. The single most dangerous oil change habit in America is following a fixed mileage interval without adjusting for how you actually drive. The National Institutes of Health published research showing that anti-wear additives in engine oil degrade non-linearly. Once they begin to fail, the rate of degradation accelerates sharply, after exceeding a recommended interval by the equivalent of roughly 12,000 to 15,000 kilometers. Phosphate anti-wear additive depletion becomes dramatically faster with each additional mile. At 20,000 kilometers over interval, phosphate depletion is 73% worse than at the 5,000 kilometer mark. Houston engine specialist and ASE master technician Raymond Torres has rebuilt over 400 engines in 19 years. I can tell within 5 minutes of pulling an engine whether the owner was a short trip driver doing quick lube intervals or a highway driver with consistent habits. The short trip engine is a disaster. Sludge in the oil galleries, glazed cylinder walls, bearing surfaces that look sandblasted. The highway engine looks almost new at 150,000 miles. Same interval on paper, completely different outcomes. The sticker has no idea how you drive. But here is what makes this worse. The manufacturer's recommended interval on your windshield sticker assumes ideal driving conditions. Steady highway speeds, moderate temperature, low load. The moment you add towing, short trips, extreme heat, dusty roads, or a turbocharger under heavy use, that interval shortens dramatically. Kevin Marsh of Atlanta, Georgia bought a 2019 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro for $55,000. He towed a boat every weekend from April to October, sometimes for 5-hour round trips in 95-degree Georgia heat. He followed Toyota's 10,000-mile oil change interval exactly. At 88,000 miles, Kevin's oil analysis showed iron at 91 parts per million, nearly 4 times the normal ceiling. His valve train showed measurable wear at teardown. The specific cause, towing under high heat, degrades oil 40% faster than normal driving conditions. His 10,000-mile interval was functionally a 14,000-mile interval for his actual use case. Repair costs, $4,200 in valve train work. Had Kevin shortened his interval to 5,000 miles during towing season, adding roughly $240 per year in extra oil changes, he would have avoided every dollar of that repair. That is $0.005 per mile in prevention versus $0.047 per mile in repair cost. At this point, you understand exactly what is killing the engines around you. Now let's talk about what the drivers who have passed 400,000 miles actually do instead. The habits that build 400,000-mile engines. Before we get into these practices, understand this. The evidence for what you are about to hear does not come from oil brand marketing. It comes from the maintenance logs of vehicles that have actually done it. A 2007 Toyota Tundra at 1 million miles. A Tacoma at 1.6 million. Every long-haul trucking fleet that reliably crosses 500,000 miles per engine, the habits are consistent across every single one of them. James Harrington. Every driver who has crossed 400,000 miles starts their car and drives gently for the first 5 minutes, not idling in the driveway. Oil pressure builds within the first few seconds of cranking. What the engine needs next is gentle circulation under load to push fresh oil to every surface. Cam lobes, valve train, turbo shaft bearings, before demanding full power. Portland tribologist James Harrington is specific. The key window is from startup to the moment your engine coolant temperature gauge reaches the normal operating band, usually 195 to 210 degrees. During that window, keep engine RPM below 2,500 and avoid sustained highway speeds. You are not warming up the cab, you are lubricating a machine. Drivers who do this consistently see cam lobe wear measurements at 200,000 miles that are comparable to what most engines show at 60,000 miles. Carlos Espinoza. Every 400,000-mile engine has been run exclusively on OEM specification filters or verified equivalent filters with the correct bypass valve pressure rating for that engine. This is not brand loyalty, it is engineering. GM's own service bulletin confirms that wrong spec filters send unfiltered oil to your bearings from the very first cold start after an oil change. For Toyota vehicles, the OEM Toyota filter retails for $8 to $12 and meets exact flow and bypass specifications. For GM vehicles, the AC Delco PF63E is the factory equivalent. For Ford, the Motorcraft FL500S. Paying $4 more per oil change to use the correct filter is worth $7,400 in engine damage. The math is not complicated. Raymond Torres. Every 400,000-mile vehicle owner adjusts their oil change interval based on their actual driving conditions, not their last oil change sticker. The framework is straightforward. Normal highway driving with a non-turbocharged engine, follow manufacturer interval. Turbocharged engine under any condition, reduce interval by 30%. Frequent towing or high-load driving, reduce interval by 40%. Predominantly short trips under 5 miles, change oil every 3,000 miles, regardless of oil type. This protocol is not extreme. It costs between $80 and $240 more per year in additional oil changes. It prevents the $6,000 to $10,000 engine failure that kills most vehicles before 150,000 miles. Patricia Nguyen. This is it. This is the habit the title referred to. Every driver who has passed 400,000 miles on a single engine has used oil analysis at least periodically to verify what is actually happening inside their engine. A $28 sample to Blackstone Laboratories or AmSoil's oil analysis program takes 3 minutes to collect with a provided kit and mails back results in 5 to 7 days. Those results tell you your exact wear metal levels in parts per million, your remaining additive package through TBN measurement, and whether your current oil and interval are actually protecting your engine or quietly killing it. Nashville oil analysis consultant Patricia Nguyen has analyzed the maintenance records of verified 400,000-mile vehicles. Without exception, the owners who reach extreme mileage treat oil analysis the way a commercial pilot treats instrument readings, as data, not guesswork. They do not assume the oil is fine because no warning light appeared. They do not trust the quick-lube sticker. They run a sample every other oil change and let the numbers tell them whether to change the interval, change the oil brand, or investigate a developing problem. The $28 test has saved every single one of those engines from a failure that would have happened invisibly. No symptoms, no warning, just a sudden catastrophic event at the worst possible moment. But here is what makes this profound. Oil analysis transforms your oil change from a scheduled appointment into a precision maintenance event tailored to your exact engine, your exact driving pattern, and your exact conditions. That is the gap between the engines that quit at 90,000 miles and the ones that are still pulling loads at 400,000. Victor Shepard. Victor Shepard of Louisiana drove his 2007 Toyota Tundra to 1 million verified miles. He used full synthetic oil, changed it every 5,000 miles, used OEM Toyota filters, never idled for warm-up, and ran oil analysis samples periodically throughout the truck's life. Toyota was so impressed they invited him to their engineering headquarters to study the truck. The engine and transmission were original. The result was not luck. It was a system. The same system you now have. Next, 7 habits of people who never replace their tires early. 500,000-mile drivers do this.